Hello ladies and gentlemen, I am your host for this randomised gaming video, Random Gamer Riven, and today I thought I'd actually go and have a quick chat about possibly one of the worst PAL PS2 conversions going. This is the Metal Slug Anthology, and this is possibly one of the worst conversions of Metal Slug I've ever played. This is a PAL version you want to avoid like the plague. So from the very get-go, you'll notice that the game is of course running at 50Hz. You'll also notice the screen aspect is quite small even for 50Hz, and yes, it does look suspiciously like a PSP screen because this is a conversion of the PSP version. The problem is, as everyone knows, the PSP version actually runs at 60Hz, whereas this PAL PS2 conversion was only released at 50Hz. Yes, it's completely unoptimized and it's horrible stuff. So the Metal Slug Anthology is a collection of the original 7 Metal Slug games. That's Metal Slug 1 through 6, and you also get Metal Slug X. There are game options, as you can see. Sadly, there aren't any display options, although the manual shows a screenshot with a display option, but I believe that was from the Wii or the NTSC PS2 version. This PAL version is notoriously bad, and what adds insult to injury is the fact it got re-released relatively recently again on the PS4. So if you are a European PS4 owner, do not under any circumstances buy the PAL PS2 Anthology from the European store. You will get the same version as this, and this has a whole host of problems, not least being the amount of in-game lag input that occurs. So I'm going to show you the first 3 Metal Slugs and give you an idea of just how bad it is by showing some of the problems. But as you'll notice, there's some slight graphical artifacting, not least in the intro video. There was a bit at the bottom and to the left and the right of the screen. The other thing is it's not a true arcade experience, as the how to play has been removed totally. There's no option to add it back in. And the entire game is running at 50Hz. Which means it feels like it's running underwater. Add to that, there is a bizarre input lag that's somehow been added to the game, so no matter how quickly you normally shoot in the game, there is a delay whenever you press the button. And as you can see in the top right corner just now, there's also some in-game loading just to add more misery to this collection. This really is a truly awful collection, and I can't see why SNK allowed this, released by Aegis Entertainment, allowed Aegis to do that, and then to re-release it again is just shocking. So just press start there, straight into the game. I'm just going to show you the lag here. If you see me press the sling button, you can hear the button presses, and you'll notice that it's about half a second delay between when you press the button to when the shot comes out. That should be instantaneous, and it is in the arcade version. The other thing is you'll notice the game looks substantially slower. That's because this is only running at 50Hz, so it's running at what would be 50 frames or 25 frames depending on the frame rate of the game. It is 60Hz Metal Slug, well, it is 60 frames a second, but it was frame locked at 30, but some elements still run at 60 frames, like the waterfall, as I learnt from one commentator. A lot of other commentators said it was frame locked constantly at 30. No, there are a few elements that do run at 60 frames, but most of the game actually only runs at 30 frames, even on the Neo Geo. So straight off the bat, the aspect ratio is just totally and utterly wrong, and it's clearly the PSP aspect ratio. This collection was also released on the Wii, and the Wii version is substantially better, but you ideally want the Japanese Wii version because that allowed you to adjust the controls, and by default in the European one, the grenade button was done by shaking either the nunchuck or the Wii remote, as I recall, which was far from ideal in a game like this. So I'm just going to blitz through the first 3 stages of each, but you'll just see some of the many unexpected problems with this release. I mean, we've seen slowdown here that's not present in the original arcade version. I mean, I unfortunately bought this brand new back in about 2008, and suffice to say, I played it for about 10 minutes and then thought that was a complete waste of money. So I'm here to tell you, not to pick it up. And as I mentioned, the European PS4 version is this version, sadly. They didn't use the NTSC version, they used this version for the Anthology collection, because it's a PS2 collection release, so don't buy the PS2 European version. I actually saw people commenting saying they'd actually asked Sony for their money back because this version was so bad, running at the wrong frame rate, frame lag and everything, input lag, you name it. There are fortunately plenty of other releases of the Metal Slug games on PS4. Unfortunately, I'm not sure if they've all been released yet, but the Arcade Archive, the ACA, they've released most of the Neo Geo Metal Slugs, and they are a fantastic set of collection. There's also, you can get a Code Mystics release of Metal Slugs as well. So there's actually Metal Slug 3 has 3 releases. There's an Arcade Archive release of it. There's this release in the Anthology. And there's also a Code Mystics version, which I think was just called Metal Slug 3 Online or something, that had online play as well. So literally you can buy Metal Slug 3 multiple times on the PS4. So if you are looking to get the PS2 version, you ideally want an NTSC copy. I suspect you probably want to see if there was an NTSC Japanese version released, as usually they tend to do the collections much better. There are a couple of really wonky PAL collections. The other one you should watch out for is the King of Fighters collection as well. That is absolutely terrible as well. And I do have that. And if anyone wants to see a video, shout in the comment and I'll actually video that one as well. There was, bizarrely, it was weird. In Europe, we got a King of Fighters collection that was like 94, 95, 96, 97, 98. In Japan, they released them as individual games in more collections, and the Japanese versions were 100 times better. So, as you can see, Metal Slug 1 here is far from perfect. So I'm just going to jump into the first stage of each of them. So I'll do the first stage of Metal Slug 1, first stage of Metal Slug 2, and the first stage of Metal Slug 3 to show the main 3. Metal Slug 4, 5 and 6 are not particularly good games, I have to admit. But to be fair, I would probably prefer to play the PS1 version of Metal Slug 1 with its horribly cut up animation and its heavily reduced loading times in comparison to this collection. So here we are. By the way, you can't actually skip these screens. You should be able to. Usually in some of them you can do, but Metal Slug 2. So again, we've got the loading. And again, the how to play sequence is cut. So I'll stick with Marco. I'm just going to quickly nip through the first stage of Metal Slug 2. Now, there is slowdown, supposedly, in the original Neo Geo arcade version. I think they tried to emulate the slowdown a little bit in this one, although I must admit the slowdown in things like some of the emulators like MAME tends to over-bring the slowdown. Having played Metal Slug 2 in the arcade originally, and the original Neo Geo version, I found the slowdown in a lot of the emulators is actually worse than what it actually was originally. So yes, there's no blood code either. I mean, fortunately the blood is left on, but if you wanted the white blood, you don't appear to be able to use it either. I mean, there's quite a few options you would expect to be in this collection that are simply missing. I'm sure quite a few of you are just looking at the size of the screen and just going, ugh, I know I am. It's just, I mean, this is really is literally smaller than usually 50 Hz. It's also in a weird screen position as well. You notice it's the top of the screen. It's not at, usually it's centered. This is just weirdly positioned at the top. In fact, to be honest, you'd probably find if you had the PSP version and you had a PSP 2000 or 3000 and connected that to a TV via a component lead, it would probably look better than this one. Probably play better as well, as that would be in 60 Hz. Or at least running at the correct speed. In fact, this is one of the few versions of Metal Slug that actually runs at 50 Hz. I think Metal Slug X on the PS1 is one of the other few. Generally, most of the collections of most releases of Metal Slug have always run at the intended arcade speed of 60 Hz. Because weirdly, the one thing that occurred in PAL is that although the home consoles were 50 Hz, the arcade versions were always 60 Hz, so they were always using an NTSC system even in Europe. So you'd play the arcade version, get the 60Hz full screen experience in the arcade, and then you come home and play the home conversion. If you did Street Fighter 2, you get 60Hz arcade experience, but when you played the home version on your SNES, that would be 50Hz. So yes, even despite my handicap, I'm going to try and beat this boss without dying. I'm a very experienced Metal Slug player. I have 1cc Metal Slug 1 and 3. I absolutely hate Metal Slug 3 because originally I thought you cannot 1cc this because it's such a horrible game, but I have ended up doing it along with one of my co-Randomised Gaming team members. We did it a few years back and we're just like, ugh. Metal Slug 2 nearly 1cc. There's always that bit in the tunnel where the guy's crawling around. But as you can see there, mid-level loading, so I mean this is akin to the Saturn's version. Really the PS2 version should have very, very minimal loading. It shouldn't really have loading at all, considering the stats of the PS2. So I'm just going to jump into Metal Slug 3. I won't show you any of the other Metal Slugs. I mean, again, you'll notice in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen, some games are displaying a weird artifact as well. It's just all a bit strange, this collection. It looks like they thought, someone at Aegis or SNK thought, oh, hey, the PSP one's done really well. How about release it on PS2? And they've just quickly hashed it out. As I said, there is a King of Fighters. It's the Orchi Saga collection that is just as bad. In Japan, they released the Orchi games in multiple sets. They released a 3-pack. The European collection and the US one, they're the same version, is absolutely dire. And if anyone, as I said, if anyone wants to see that version, do leave a comment. I will do a video. But basically, this is a do not buy this. Because there aren't actually that many videos that really covered this anthology. I want to show just how bad the PAL version is. I mean, we always say that by the time you get to PS2, they kind of got rid of a lot of the 50Hz issues, but they didn't quite. In fact, even some PS3 games, because the PS3 did support RGB SCAR and could be played via composite, had the option to basically still do conventional TVs. And quite a lot of games on the PS3, if you stick them via composite or RGB, basically, some will give you a 50-60 Hz option, some won't. So in fact, you can actually say that you can play PS3 games at 50 Hz. There are a few you can play at 50 Hz. I mean, my general feeling is that this whole game feels like it's running underwater. It just does not feel as fast, sharp. I mean, because the controls, is not just the shooting, the movement as well feels sluggish. It just feels like you're walking underwater. Even just turning around, you'll notice it just doesn't look. I should be able to do that much faster than what I am doing it. It should be like near instant, but this just feels really slow and laborious. And for Sony to allow this collection, the PAL version, to be re-released on PS4 is just shocking. There were quite a few PS4 games in the PS2 collection that were originally the 50Hz version, and that caused a whole heap of problems because, of course, it's actually a 60Hz console. It cannot output 50Hz, so you got all sorts. So again, we've got loading here, but basically you got all sorts of problems with a few games where you would get horrible, basically tearing and all sorts because the game was trying to run at 50 while the console was shoving it through at 60. That just meant mass screen ripping and blurring and other horrible effects. Now, they patched most of the games, but one or two in the PS2 collection are still 50Hz, bizarrely, and the Metal Slug Anthology is one of them. And if you just look on the community forums and even just generally search the PS2 Anthology in Europe, you will find some very unfortunate stories of just saying, don't buy this, don't buy this. By the way, if you are going to 1cc Metal Slug 3, I found it's a very good idea to go a particular route. Because certain routes are very, very tricky, but some routes are much easier. Again, got a little pause there, and here we go with the boss. Let's get these cannon shots out. There's one thing I hate about this mech is you have to be a bit careful, because sometimes if you press jump and shoot at the same time, you of course detonate the mech. So. And I have done that on a few occasions where I'm doing a boss really rapidly, press jump and shoot at the same time, and then bam, my mech, or your tank, your Metal Slug. Technically it should be Metal Slug, I shouldn't say mecha, they are the Metal Slugs and they're different revisions, but a couple of, more than one occasion I've blown up my Metal Slugs accidentally. So the boss is nearly down, he's firing his bigger shot now. But you can see the whole game should be running much faster, and I should be able to move my character faster. So there are some real horror stories on the PS2. The PS2 is the last probably console where there were some real horror stories in terms of 50-60 Hz, and it's actually quite poorly documented, because a lot of people basically just kind of forgot about 50 Hz a little bit with the PS2, but when you actually look at it, there were some real horror stories. It really is the last of the horror stories for 50 Hz. So unless some new console comes along in the future that doesn't properly do 50 and 60 Hz or something like that, we've probably seen the last of it. I mean, HDMI and how things have changed have meant that all games are now running at 60 Hz, but as we've shown with the PS2, as I've mentioned, some of the PS2 collection games in PAL were still 50 Hz, and that brings a whole raft of issues. They had to actually patch most of them. I know people were complaining about a couple of them. I thought I saw Rogue Galaxies and Dark Chronicles were originally complained about as Sony foolishly. There probably should be like an Sony thread about the various mistakes Sony's have made over the years, but yeah, one of the reasons they've done it is because some games, they only have, of course, the European translation, so they only have the Spanish and French translation in 50 Hz. So what they should actually be looking to doing is getting the original 50-60 Hz source code and correcting it to run, well, basically the 50 Hz code and correcting it to run at 60 Hz properly, and then releasing that. But as we know, there are quite a lot of games that they no longer have the source code for, and that's where the problems begin. But as you can see there, this is Metal Slug 3 running an awful lot slower than it should be, with unresponsive controls. And yes, in-game and mid-level loading just for the fun of it. So I hope you enjoyed this little video. So as I said, just avoid this collection period and pick up, certainly on PS2, pick up some of the other versions of Metal Slug. You can buy Metal Slug 3 on its own, and that's a much better conversion. And the same with PS4, pick up the arcade archive collections, which are absolutely fantastic. Hope you've enjoyed this little informative video about how bad the PAL version is. And if you like it, please do thumbs up. And as always, subscribe to the channel as well. Every little helps. I have been your host, Random Gamer Riven.